Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Equities down by a third of 1%, yields a bit higher, up by 4 basis points. The 10-year 4.1243. Under surveillance this morning, Donald Trump's favorite word.
If these companies don't make their cars and products here, then they will pay a tariff, a very stiff tariff, when they send their products into the United States. We're going to call this policy Build It in America Plan. We brought the rate down, and you saw this, from close to 40% to 21%. Now we're going to get it down to 15%, but only if they build it in America.
So here's the latest. Global markets bracing for Donald Trump's plans to overhaul the U.S. economy through steep tariffs and big tax cuts, including cutting the corporate tax rate to 15%. Adam Posen of the Peterson Institute issuing a word of caution, writing, the Trump approach weaponizes uncertainty. But uncertainty is a difficult weapon to control, and it will backfire on whoever wields it too widely. Adam joins us now for more. Adam, welcome back to the program, sir. Always important to spend some time with you and think through some of these issues. Let's just talk about that quote a little bit more. What do you mean when you say it's a difficult weapon to control and will backfire on whoever wields it too widely?
Thank you, John, for having me back on surveillance. I think the issue is that you do two things that don't necessarily work in economics when you threaten a lot, but it also is harmful to you. The first is you create uncertainty not just in the minds of that corporate CEO or that particular government you're negotiating with. You create uncertainty ripple effects throughout a whole bunch of other governments, a whole bunch of other companies, and they start to self-insure. They don't just get scared to do what you want them to say. They don't necessarily do what you want them to do. The second problem of this uncertainty weaponization that Trump is big on, or at least is one way of rationalizing Trump's policies, is that you actually have to implement it to be credible. You can't just threaten it. So a lot of people talking in the markets, a lot of pundits, a lot of people even affiliated with the campaign say, well, this is all just about a negotiating position. Trump will threaten these tariffs, Trump will threaten these taxes, and that will induce the reshoring to the U.S. But you can't do that unless it's credible you're actually going to do it. And the only way to do that is to actually implement the policies. So you get the harm up front and you don't necessarily get the benefit. One of the ironies, John, for people you and I and others on this program talk about is that the more the markets bet that Trump, A, will win, but B, will not actually do these crazy things, the more it is incumbent upon him to have to do them.
But Adam, when you hear from some Trump economic advisors, what they say is that it will be used as a carrot and stick approach, meaning maybe 2.5% of the 60% they want to do on China, but 2.5% every month until they get Xi Jinping to the table. Because what they say is that there needs to be fair trade between China and the United States, and they do not view trade right now between China and the United States as fair. Do you view trade right now, what China is doing, as fair?
No, but I also don't view it as something you whine about. I mean, this is the thing that both the Biden team and the Trump team have done, is if they had been Georgia playing against Texas, the top two in the football, the college football, they would have spent their whole time whining about the referees, and when a call went against them or the crowd went against them, they would have packed it up and gone home. That's what they're doing. They're packing it up and going home. But real players in the major leagues, which the U.S. economy should be, if you have to win, you win even if the referees are skewed against you, even if the crowd's rooting against you. You don't get so caught up in excuses and small deterrents.
Okay, Adam, but the Biden administration kept
trade is too small. Sorry.
The Biden administration kept those tariffs on. So what would what would be your idea for both of these campaigns to try to level the playing field?
Well, but I think the point is the Biden administration and the Trump administration kept on those tariffs, and it's had absolutely no effect. The so-called phase one tariffs on China deal, which Trump had no effect in terms of what they were buying or selling. Both the Biden and the Trump administrations claim the Chinese are still stealing IP, still subsidizing, still doing this and that. So you can say, oh, well, then if this didn't work, let's try it tenfold. But that's the key difference here, is that Trump this time is talking repeatedly on the record in the platform about doing tariffs at 10 to 20 times the level he did last time. and doing them across a whole range of countries, not just China, at a much higher level. At China, he's talking about multiple fold. And so it's going to have much worse effects on the U.S. economy. You can shrug it off. It's not good. It's a tax on people. Companies that were affected by the tariffs lost valuation, as the New York Fed study showed. It was inflationary for people. But the big thing is Harris has at least said repeatedly, Vice President Harris has at least said repeatedly, tariffs are a tax. They're a regressive tax that hurt working people more, which is full on true. And she's not going to do across the board tariffs. I'd still wish she, in her administration, if they're in, reconsider this whole approach. But nonetheless, there's a very big difference between stopping the tariffs where they are now and only using them in specific cases at China, which is bad but minor, versus doing across the board huge tariffs.
There's a bigger question here, Adam, and this is the reason why the whole concept of tariffs has been resonating with a lot of people, which is there are whole swaths of the U.S. economy that feel left behind by globalization, by moving manufacturing overseas, and would welcome the manufacturing and some of the industrial prowess to come back to the United States. Is there a proposal to increase production in the United States in a sustainable way with the staff that we currently have?
I think the answer, Lisa, is no. I mean, I might push back at you at that political perception because it's not really grounded in reality, but certainly there are people who are obsessed with having domestic manufacturing. And we have manufacturing. You know, you talk about Apple, you talk about NVIDIA, you talk about all these companies that are worth much, much more, as somebody tweeted this morning, than the companies that make stuff. You know, these are the companies that design stuff, that do R&D. And so then you can say, well, what about the terrible things that are happening? There aren't that many terrible things that are happening. We have the highest labor force participation rate in forever. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in forever. We have income growth much higher than it's been. We have fewer people in poverty than it's ever been. So this constant refrain that we're losing because our manufacturing has moved up and up and up in value and become more productive and therefore needs less workers on the floor is falsehood. So then you say, okay, but how do we buy off the angry people? Well, that's how you get Trump. And that's not good. And so at some point you have to appeal to people that they maybe shouldn't be so angry or that they maybe should adjust. And the reality is, we can't drive the entire country about what's happened in a few counties and a few states. I mean, that's part of our politics, that year after year, a majority of the country clearly has views on whether it's gun control or globalization or the economy or healthcare, and it gets stymied by very small groups.
Adam, where does national security fall into this at a time where an increasing number of the goods that we're talking about could potentially have some national security components?
That's a much more serious issue, Lisa, and that's the one which is genuinely difficult and people are wrestling with. I mean, you can imagine, it seems a bit of a stretch, but you can imagine, for example, if we do buy Chinese EVs, that there would be planted bugs and controls and things in there that could be dangerous. Not clear what the economic response, however, is the way to get around it. That doesn't mean you should let everything in. But we see right now, there's news reports now about all these weapons that the Russians are using, all these things that the Chinese are using, where you can see that ASML, TSMC, all these companies that we're protecting are still selling and producing in China. So, and that's in the very narrow spectrum of focusing on just the chips and just these critical industries with the full weight of the U.S. government and allies, and you still can't maintain the sanctions and the controls. So again, it's like the tariffs. You just keep upping and upping and upping it, saying, well, we didn't try hard enough?
Yeah.
Or do you rethink?
Adam, it's a tough spot. A conversation you and I will continue. We'll all continue with you through to election day and beyond. Adam Posen there at the Peterson Institute.